How are you doing today? I am so glad it is warming up, and I'm happy to hear that the power is back on in Texas. That's a relief. Well, do you remember how exciting it was on our last reading? Mafatu killed the shark to save his pet dog. All right, now the adze was completed. Thus the canoe too was beginning to take finished shape. It was 15 feet long, 3 feet deep, and scarcely a foot wide. Often as he worked, the boy would pause to admire his craft. It was a beautiful canoe. How proud his father would be. Alas, that it was such slow work. When the hull had been hollowed out, it must be smoothed off with the adze and caulked with Archie gum. Then a mast must be made from pukatea, straight and true, a sail woven from pandanus, and there was rigging to be made of sennet, tough and strong as wire. The craft would have been finished sooner if only there were not so many things to interfere. Every day, for example, Mafatu climbed the plateau to his lookout. He had not missed one day since he arrived at the island. He knew that when the eaters of men came, they would sail by day. They would have to beat against the prevailing wind. It would take them many hours to come from Smoking Island. Mafatu would be able to see them from his lookout long before they arrived. If only he could be ready before they came. He must. But that trip up the mountain every day took so much precious time. His canoe would have been finished days ago, but for that. Today I will not go, the boy thought, as his adze whirled and chipped. It takes too long. Then he sighed and laid down the adze. Caution was the better part of wisdom. He picked up his shining spear with its new shaft and turned toward the trail that led up to the high plateau. Yuri leaped ahead, his nose keen pointed to the ground. This day, as Mafatu climbed the rough trail through the jungle, he was preoccupied, lost in his thoughts. His mind was not in this business at all. He was thinking about the rigging of his canoe, planning how he could strengthen it here, tighten it there. Some instinct of danger must have made him pause, warning him to beware. Scarcely louder, there was a rustle in the undergrowth, scarcely louder than an insect's hum. The boy drew up, tense and listening. Yuri had dashed off on some wild goose chase of his own. The boy stood rooted, alert. He saw it then, a wild boar with a lowered head, eyes red with hate, the flash of its wicked tusks. The animal pawed the ground suddenly. Its grunting snort broke the stillness. Mafatu knew a blind impulse to turn and run. Then he drew a deep breath and shouted out a challenge. Puavuri, wild pig, I, Mafatu, have come to kill you. The boar charged. Over the ground it tore. Foam flew back from its tusks. The boy braced himself. He met the charge with a perfectly timed thrust of the spear. The boar impaled itself, shoulder deep upon the spearhead. Mafatu was thrown off balance, sent spinning headlong. Over and over he rolled. He leaped to his feet in a panic, defenseless. But the boar toppled, gave a convulsive shudder, lay still. Mafatu was struck dumb. He had killed a wild pig. For a second he could not grasp the wonderful truth of it. Then he leaped wildly into the air, shouting, "Ai, I have killed the pua! Do you hear me, Tavananui? I, your son, have killed a boar. Ha!" Yuri came leaping out of the jungle and barked himself hoarse at sight of the pig. "A fine one you are," Mafatu joked at his dog. "Where were you when I needed you? Off chasing butterflies, that's you." Was it for this I saved you from the teeth of the male? I've a mind not to give you one mouthful of pua. Yuri hung his head and dropped his tail, then brightened as Mafatu laughed joyously. Foolish one, here, drag your share. The boy made a rude sled of bamboo and loaded the heavy animal onto it. Then he hitched a stout liana about Yuri's neck, and the dog threw his weight into the task. The two started home in triumph with their burden, Mafatu singing at the top of his lungs, a lusty song of blood and battle. He was all Polynesian now, charged with the ancient fierceness of his race. Victory coursed like fire through his veins. There was nothing he would not have dared, nothing he feared. Hey, but life was good. When they reached the campsite, Mafatu built up a roaring fire and set a pile of stones to heat. While the stones were heating, the boy cleaned the pig at the water's edge, then stuffed its empty belly with succulent tea leaves and red bananas. When at last the oven stones were white and smoking, Mafatu dragged the pig back to the fire and rolled it upon the hot umu. Then he covered it with layer upon layer of plantain leaves, dozens of them, to hold in the steam and to allow the pork to cook through slowly. Yuri leaped about, sniffing at the delicious odors, barking his delight. Pork! After weeks of fish and fish and fish, how good it would taste. Besides, fish was not good for dogs, too many bones. Kiwi, no meat eater, looked on calmly, wondering what all this disturbance was about. The bird was content with a coconut that Mafatu split open for him, that he might join in the feast. And that's all for now.